listeners. Um, this blog is going to change tack a little bit in the times to come. Um, I have founded, in the meanwhile, a new company called the Chrystal Ball, and it will be about reading the future and drawing some conclusions from it. And uh, we will approach several subjects, many of them quite different, possibly interrelated, and sometimes just presented separately. This is just to give this blog a little bit more focus and more of a sense of purpose. Um, and there are two subjects that I would like to talk about today, and they have some interrelation, but mostly I will deal with them separately. Um, so, in the good tradition of the crystal ball, um, I'm going to try to say something about the markets, the stock markets, that is, or the financial markets, if you wish. And the and you know, in talking about the markets, um, there's a huge elephant in the room, and this elephant is actually called inflation. Um, as we have all seen, we've been through a period of really low inflation, almost non-existent, and now to an extent that that like newspapers or magazines are printing covers like "Is inflation dead?" that type of thing, and and then also at the same time, central banks have been printing money like there's no tomorrow, and the what I think is quite likely is that inflation will make a huge return in the years to come, and that will obviously favor real hard assets like commodities and real estate over financial assets like bonds and stocks. And I think this is the main way in which to make a lot of money over the coming years. And it's still early days, of course. I mean, stocks are still flying. You just have to look at the valuations of like the Amazons and the Netflixes and some of the other stocks that I've talked about in this blog over the past year or so to see that the stock market is still doing really well. But my guess is that at some stage this will change over the next few years. The problem always with calling a bottom is that everything, all the elements can be in place, but it can still take a while. But I think that one has to get sort of at least mentally prepared to accept that a new world of inflation, which will involve buying gold and real estate and that type of thing. So that's my one observation. The second one is the state of America. I find it very interesting. I mean, you got Trump, of course, who is very much reasserting America's power. Now, America, according to me, used to be kind of a magical place, a place where people did everything better than we did in the rest of the world. People looked better, more tanned, whiter teeth, and they got a bunch of technology going. In short, they were doing everything great, and that's because I think they came out of the Second World War relatively unscathed and made the best of that. And Americans were so powerful in that era that that they basically had everything. And the last thing that remained is that they wanted to be liked. And there was always some sort of the myth of the ugly American, And us Europeans were masters at keeping Americans on their toes by making them feel a little bit, inferior to our superior cultural, being. But I think that game is kind of coming to an end. Um, Europe managed to be the sort of the smarter but poorer brother. But America is no longer buying that, and Europe, played the Americans very effectively. And in that period that the Americans still really wanted to be liked. But America has caught up. I mean, you can drink decent coffee there now. They're even selling their Starbucks here in Europe. And I must admit, I'm a convert. And they're dressing better. They're not bleaching their teeth anymore. And when you go to New York, you're actually in a very hip cultural environment with people that dress well, etc. So, I think America has managed also to catch up on the soft side of things. But there's another trend going on, and that is that America, although still all powerful, is has to watch, for example, China, which is growing very rapidly and which economy will overtake it in the next 20 years if they don't watch out. So even though it's all powerful and it's caught up very nicely on the cultural side of things, it also realizes that it's become more sophisticated. It has less need of approval of the European cousins, and it doesn't want to be used anymore by everybody in the world just in order to be liked. It doesn't really care about that anymore. So I think Trump has set a very new trend for America, a more independent and a more sophisticated America that is really more out for its own good. That doesn't need to be liked so much anymore around the world, and is asserting itself. And so I think one of the consequences for Europe, for example, is that Europe will really have to pull up its socks now. The times are done that we can sit here sipping champagne with the Americans paying for our defense budgets. And that obviously is very interesting again because, with Brexit, etc. Because Brexit, whatever you think about it, is weakening Europe at the time that Europe should really be strengthened. And, Trump in a way is and the way Trump is dealing with Brexit is kind of an example of this new American assertiveness that it's just allowing itself to pull Europe apart. Trump, in his backing of Brexit, is basically saying, well, the UK can belong to Europe or to the US, and we'd rather have it belong to the US. So Europe is actually entering a very important phase where it has to reassert, and it has to stop sort of being so poncy as well. There's some hard choices to be made, and we need to make them. We need to build our military strength. We need to be a bit more ruthless, in protecting our economic strength, which is still huge. And maybe we have to be a little bit less tolerant towards, immigrants, etc. We have to protect our culture also. And so for Europe, this kind of means, hard times ahead if no measures are taken. And the US, in the meanwhile, I think will be doing really well in the coming years. And this also links into the stock markets, of course, but that's maybe a subject for a next blog. Thank you.